Welcome back. Here's where you left off. Spoilers ahead for Time Risk 2 by Elyse Douglas. So Time Risk 2, the Titanic tale. Not exactly, but you get my point, Leonard.
My heart will go on for this book.
My heart will go on for Edward. Edmund. Edmund. Edmund, yeah. So this book was book 2 of Elyse Douglas's series of sort of time travel books where she integrates it into historical events. Being a historian, I enjoy these kind of books. We enjoyed book 1. Book 2, I think, raised the bar, both in the context of her writing and in using a historical event that was been so documented. It's hard to weave a story into it. And although I have to admit, when we made a lot of predictions during this book where we were like, I was like, there's no way they're not getting on the Titanic. And then they did. And then secondly, you were like, there's going to be the Titanic moment where she gets on the raft or whatever. And that didn't happen. So in a lot of ways, this book was immensely disappointing because nothing we thought was going to happen actually happened. Right, Leonard?
Well, we were looking at it in a way that that we were comparing it to the movie itself, right? And I'm glad it did not. All our predictions were wrong because if it does, it's just this book become very, very sad and copied, right? But the way the storyline works is it works really well because it took historical facts and manipulated in a way that it works for the storytelling, right? And I do enjoy that part. And the storyline itself is of Rachel, the main character, going back to the past to save Grace because she was hired to save this person to bring it to the future. I'm glad that it didn't work out the same way because it actually makes the storyline more compelling because throughout the whole book, especially at the end, I was like thinking, I think we had a discussion offline that what happened if Grace do go back to the future, right? That means there's a good chance this means she follow her job. But deep down in my head, it's like, okay, you took a person from the past, bringing it to the future. All the people that she touched and talked to and all that stuff or whatever, would that affect the person, Catherine, the person who hired the company to bring Rachel back to the past, affect her past that changes the future? So when Grace shows up, is it the same?
It
there's
did.
a lot of things
it did because Catherine never hired her to go back, so it did have that effect. It did. But Grace was the invitation of Catherine to come to him and be like, "Yo, let me send her back in time to save her." So the goal was achieved of saving her, but Catherine doesn't even know that she was the one who instigated it. Which is great time travel logic and really messes with your head, and I kind of love that. It's sort of the idea of you would never know if somebody did something if you were in an alternate timeline. You'd never know, right? Yeah,
that was the purpose of I think for the past 2 books, because the first book it changed in a way that it didn't really affect the timeline. This one it did change the timeline in a way that because at the end of the book Rachel came back. Right, and when Rachel came back, they didn't know that she went time travel. And I posted this in the last episode. What happened to the Rachel currently in the future when she goes back to the future? Right, there's a timeline shift. There's a shift in the timeline that Rachel went back to the past, then went back to the future. They didn't know she went to the past, but Rachel was out and about doing her thing. What happened to that Rachel? You posted in the last episode, is there 2 Rachels? Right? So there was a lot of
there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and the writer, she doesn't deal with it. At least doesn't deal with it. She basically says she's off somewhere. So we as the reader are welcome to make that decision for ourselves. I don't really have a good argument either way to say that she replaced the Rachel. I mean, it makes sense from a writing perspective, makes her life easier, but it would be interesting to have two of them. I mean,
yeah, it'll be very interesting. But that's one of the questions that we actually posed ourselves in the last episode. But let's talk about the book. What do you like what do you like or dislike? What do you like and dislike about the book?
I like that she really upped her writing this time round. And when I say upped it, I mean the character, there was a much more integrated storyline. I felt was more complicated. There were more characters in there. There was a mystery that she woven in there with Grace because we didn't exactly know what happened to her until she actually time travels back. So she kind of had this time travel mystery crime sort of slant going on for the entire book. And oddly enough, the thing that surprised me the most was Grace was really not a part of the book much at all. That was just kind of interesting, other than a bit, half a chapter and some of her books that they were reading before and after. Like that's pretty much all Grace was. There wasn't a lot of interaction till near the end of the book, and so you didn't really get a sense the Grace character as she would have said, teenage girl. Like what is this teenage girl thinking? What is her deal? And when we get to New York and they're having a discussion with the aunt and the uncle, there's this teenage mischief going on, don't you think?
Yeah, it's that's actually a good point though, because when we don't know anything about Grace until literally we got to New York, right? And when she started talking to Rachel, that's when we start getting to know Grace more, right? And personally, I kind of like that because you provide that mystery of what's up with Grace and all that good stuff, and I have no problems with it. It gives that a little bit of mystery to it, right? But when we start learning more about Grace, that's when we're like, okay, now we understand why Catherine, the client, wants to take Grace and bring it to the future because she'll have a better life, right? But the one thing that they never really answered or even posed a question is like, what did Grace did in the past? How is she relevant enough that when Rachel went back to the past, saved Grace and Dory, and went back to the future, that the timeline changed significant enough that this mission was never authorized? You know what I mean? So the question I had is, did Grace did something in New York that prompt Catherine to save her, right? And what happened when Grace and Dory went back to England, started their life? Does Catherine exist? Or what was Catherine doing?
What do you mean? Catherine exists because she... I think you're confused because Catherine exists. She comes and reads.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, Catherine exists. I mean,
so she exists.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
I guess your
yes.
question is, what was the reason that Catherine shows up is because the question was posed.
Mm-hmm.
You hired this woman who went back in time, and Catherine's like, no, I didn't.
Yes,
and then she
right.
reads Grace's book, and she's like, oh, I guess I did. Timeline. So that's where we're at with it. I mean,
exactly.
Am I confused about your question?
Like, what I meant that if Catherine's never sent Rachel back to the past, what was her life after the fact? Is it way better than before? Is Catherine's ancestor changed enough that it changed? This is problem with temporal mechanics. It's like really.
I think what we're talking about here. I think the question you're getting at is, did it really have any impact on Catherine's life? And no, I don't think it did. I think Catherine had a lot of money to throw around, and she just had a hobby, which is sending somebody back in time. Like, honestly, that's the way it feels. It's like if Elon Musk made a time machine and sold it to his buddies, and one of the people went back to dance with Elvis. I mean, that literally feels like something somebody would do because they had the money. It literally feels that way. Like...
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. I think Catherine, the original timeline, Catherine did have a proper. The mission was authentic, right? And then she thinks that Grace needs to be safe, right? But now at the end of the book, Grace doesn't need to be safe, right? So the if you look at it in perspective, that if Rachel, there's two scenarios here. If Rachel brings Grace back or leave Grace in the past, right? If it brings to the future, her current timeline remains as is, right? Or it changes enough that okay, something's missing. So there's a lot of what if scenarios, right? And the good thing about this book is it gives, for me, a reader, it makes me think that there's three types of scenarios. One is saving Grace, the other one is not doing anything at all, and the other one is leaving Grace there with a better life, right? So right now we know that if Grace has a better life, she never got hired to go back to the past. What if Grace went to the future? Would that scenario still exist of Catherine needs Grace to be saved from the, you know what I mean? God, my head hurts now.
Well, I mean, technically, based on your argument there, Catherine's motivation would remain the same because Grace would disappear and her motivation for investigation would still be there. The only difference would be that they would come back together. Now, I would have been interested to hear her thoughts on doing both timelines. It would have been interesting to see a Grace come into the future and be like, what is this little box? It's called a cell phone. It does everything for you, and you will look at it incessantly. As a teenage girl, having access to all information in the world would go nuts. So I found I would have been interested to read that ending. I am happy the way the book ended, but I gotta say, there is a part of me that was curious about having to be brought forward in the future. I really gotta say.
Yeah, same here. Okay, so for me, good thing about the book, for me, if I give you my good and bad about this book, about the storyline, I mean, the good is I love the notion of going back to the past, especially during the Titanic. The for me, the most enjoyable part is us trying to figure out which is better, to follow the Titanic movie sort of feel to it, as in Grace, Rachel and Grace get to a big door and Dory hanging in dear life. That would be awesome, right? But I'm glad they didn't go that route, because it's nice to see that she didn't really change the historical facts of the story, but she ended up adding things to it that it didn't really change the historical aspect of it, right? And at the same time too, I like the interaction between Rachel and some of the characters within that timeline, right? And at the same time too, I really like they didn't really introduce Grace until the end, because it gives it that mystery of it, because we talked about several times that we didn't know anything about Grace. We didn't know about anything of this. It's nice to see that. And personally, I kind of enjoyed that part, right? The only thing that I don't like about this whole the storyline itself is the unanswered question of is there two Rachels or is there one Rachel? Was the why did the timeline change significantly enough that when she went back to the future, no one was there to greet her except two people, right? So I'm hoping that will be answered in the next book, because that one literally bugs me a bit, because there were in my opinion, it was an unanswered question that in my mind that needs to be answered. Right, so that's my take in this whole book. But overall, I do like it. Right, so the question I have for you is like, how would you rate this? I'm very curious how you want to rate this.
I'm gonna give it an 8.5. That's what I'm gonna give it, 8.5. I think if you look at it as a holistic book, there's very few things that I would fault of the book. It didn't trample on history. In other words, it didn't rewrite history, which, she's woven into history, and that's great. She didn't do anything outside of it other than my gripe, and my gripe is her putting her actual name on the Titanic roster, which is why I will say this to you, that she has now twice put her name out in the world or in various areas. And she hasn't gone by pseudonym or something like that, because now historical people were like, look, this Rachel was on the Titanic. Look, she was at Pearl Harbor. Like, to me, somebody going through history looking for this is like, here's a time traveler. She always gives her name. She shows up at historical events. Like, to me, that's a glaring hole there in the thing. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. I did enjoy the ending. Like I said earlier, I would like to have seen the scenario of Grace coming forward in time. I thought that would have been fun to expose her to all the changes and be like, yeah, we landed on the moon. Yeah, no problem. Oh, yeah, we went to space. Oh, and there's things they call computers and they do all kinds of, it would just been interesting to pluck somebody out of 1912 where they had just, like, they literally understood the beginning of flight. They literally understood the beginning of cars, but then to go out, so many 100 years later and be like, yeah, that's normal stuff, just to see a person's reaction to that, that would have been curious to me.
For me, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 because I really do enjoy it. Like I said before, I just the ending part, the little questions that I have. If I've read the next book already, if I know how it's supposed to end, that might change my aspect of this whole thing. Because right now, as a reader, reading it based on what we have in front of us, I give it an 8 because, again, the ending was a little... There's questions to the end that I need answered. I was hoping it'll be answered back at the end, but it didn't. That's why I'm going to give it. And regarding your comment about Rachel's name being put in the manifest, again, I think I mentioned this in the last episode or 2 episodes ago that I have a feeling she did it that way. I think to show to people in the future that she's still alive, without using the time beeper. Like,
I suppose so. I mean, she would be recorded as alive after the Titanic sank. I get that, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a way to tell the future I'm still alive. I'm still doing my work, right? I think that's how I'm thinking it, because it just makes sense in my head. So that's why.
Join us next time as we review chapters 1 through 5 of Expeditionary Force, Book 19, Ground State by Craig Allenson. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share a review. We love to hear from you. Send us an email at yourbookmarksinfo@gmail.com. Join us again right here where you left off.